All right, so this is lesson 1 on using the tangent ratio to find angles in a right triangle. So if you look at a right triangle, then you can actually calculate the angle by looking at the ratios of the side lengths. And so today we're going to work on using the tangent ratio. So we call it tan for short. So see, this is how you spell it, tangent ratio. But we just use the first 3 letters, and those are the 3 letters you're going to see on your calculator as well. So we often just say the tan ratio, but the full name is tangent. So the tangent ratio for any of the, an angle in a right triangle is when you divide the opposite side with the adjacent side. So first we have to work on labeling our triangle. So last lesson, the get ready lesson, we remembered that the longest side on a triangle is called the hypotenuse. So the side that's across from the right angle, that's always called the hypotenuse. But the other 2 sides, if you're talking about a specific angle, they also have names. So if I'm talking about angle A specifically, then the side that's across or opposite from side A, so if I'm standing at side A and I'm looking directly opposite to the opposite side, it's called the opposite side. And then the side that's right next to angle A is called the adjacent side. Adjacent means next to. So they're named based on, where they are relative to the angle. Okay. And you always label your triangle this way when we're talking about an angle. So the tangent ratio is always and I'm just going to erase my highlighting here because I'm going to be consistent with my colors. It's always the opposite side over the adjacent side. We're not going to be using the hypotenuse side at all today. Okay, so the tangent ratio is the opposite leg or opposite side over the adjacent side. So let's practice labeling and writing the tangent ratios for angle D and angle F in this question. I'm going to use blue when I'm talking about angle D. So here's angle D on this triangle. Now, if I'm looking straight across from D, this is going to be the opposite side. I'm going to write op for short. Actually, I'll write the full name, opposite, because it's the first time we're doing it. So this is the opposite side when we're talking about angle D. And the side next to D is the adjacent side, right? Because it's right next to it. So if I'm writing the tangent ratio for angle D, it's going to be the opposite, which is 3, over the adjacent, which is 4. So the tangent ratio is a fraction. And in a second, I'm going to show you how to use that fraction to calculate angle D, but let's practice just writing the fraction down for now. You could also write it as a decimal, 0.75. It means the same thing. Okay. Now, let's do the same thing for angle F. I'm going to use a different color. Here's angle F. Okay, so now it's going to have a different tangent ratio because it's a different angle. So when I'm labeling for angle F, this time when I look across, I see 4. So this time 4 is the opposite. And 3 is the adjacent. So it depends on which angle you're talking about, how you label your sides. But it's always the opposite side across from the angle divided by the side that's right next to it. And it just depends on which angle you're talking about. Okay, so now let's use those 2 ratios to calculate the actual angles themselves. So this is where you need to use your calculator. So any right triangle that has these ratios has the same angles. So our calculator has all those angles already stored inside it, and you just need to access them by using the right button. So if I have this tan ratio for angle D, tan of D is 3 over 4, then what I'm going to type into my calculator to actually measure angle D, and the way I write it is I use this angle symbol that looks like kind of half a triangle. That stands for angle, or you can just write D. We type in the inverse tan button. So it looks like tan with a little -1. So you can usually see that above the TAN button. So mine is in blue here. So I need to turn on my calculator and then my calculator for some, okay, there we go. And I need to press the shift button and then that tan minus 1. And I'm going to type that ratio in, 3 divided by 4, or 3 over 4. And my calculator will then have that angle stored inside it and will tell me what that angle is. So it's 36.86989765 degrees. So it says to round it off to the nearest degree here. So it's about 37 degrees. So I type in tan of 3 over 4, and I get that angle D is about 37 degrees. That's the measure of that angle. So my calculator is really powerful because it can do that. Now I can also do the same thing for angle F. So I'm just going to write that here. This is about 37 degrees. For angle F, we know that tan F is 4 over 3. So in my calculator, I use this inverse tan button, tan with a little minus 1, 4 over 3, and that's what I type in. So I'm going to do that, tan minus 1. 4 over 3. So different angle, different ratio. So I get 53.13, so it's about 53 degrees. So that's the measure of that angle. So our calculator has all those angles stored inside it based on what the ratio for the triangle is, and that way we can calculate the angles inside a triangle. We could have also gotten the angle by subtracting from 180. Because once we knew angle D, you could just subtract 90, which we already know, and 37, and we would have also gotten 53 degrees this way. All right, so we're going to do the same thing on this one. It might be a good time to pause here and try this one yourself. We're going to start with angle G here, and we're going to label the triangle, and then we're going to calculate the angles to the nearest degree. It says using the tangent ratio. So first thing you want to do is label. Throughout this whole unit, that's pretty much the first step in almost every single question. So based on angle G here, if I look straight across the triangle, that's going to tell me where my opposite side is, the side that's opposite to angle G. So that's 4. And then the side that's right next to G, that's not the hypotenuse, is going to be my adjacent side. Okay, this side that we're not using today, I'm just going to label it in green just so that we don't forget about it because we'll use it in a future lesson. That's the hypotenuse, and we're not using that side. Okay, so if I were to write the tangent ratio now, we've done step 1. Tan of G, it's always the opposite over the adjacent. So the opposite side is 4, the adjacent side is 5. So we've written our tan ratio. Perfect. So now last thing is calculator. So in our calculator, the way to access that angle and calculate it is I want to use the inverse tan button, and I'm going to use the ratio 4 over 5 that I got there. Okay, so let's type that in and see what we get. I should note here that your calculator, make sure it's in the right mode. Sometimes calculators default to radian mode. So in my calculator, I go into settings here or mode, and I make sure that I'm in degrees and I don't have radian highlighted. So make sure if you're getting weird numbers that are different from mine, that could be what's happening. Okay, so tan minus 1, or the inverse tan of 4 over 5, is about 39 degrees, 38.65, rounds up to 39. So I'm going to put G is approximately, because we've rounded it, 39 degrees. So that measurement of G is about 39 degrees there. Now the question also says find angle J. So we also want to find this angle. Now the fastest way to do that, because you don't really want to relabel everything and calculate again, is you can just use that subtract from 180 rule. So I'm going to now find angle J, and I'm just going to subtract from 180. So 180 minus 90 minus 39, and I get 51. So those are my two answers, 39 degrees and 51 degrees. Okay, so that's how to use the tangent ratio. You label your triangle, you write down your ratio, and then you use your inverse tan button on your calculator to get the angle.